Welcome to today's edition of Daytime Dialogues. It is an honor to be able to welcome today Rabbi Doron Perez, the executive chairman of the World Mizrahi Movement from Israel. He is in that post already for about 8 years, having started in 2014 when he came back from his years of shlichut in Johannesburg. Rabbi Doron is a very, very accomplished person. He made Aliyah at 18. He learned for 10 years in Yeshivot Hesder. He working on his MA in Jewish history. He's an author of a book. And most importantly, Rabbi Doron has transformed the World Mizrahi Movement into a vibrant and very, very significant organization that it is today. So Rabbi Doron, thank you so much for joining us.
Rav Lenny, thank you so much. And it's an honor to have you part of our World Board, and of course, the national movement in the United States, and a shutaf and partner, L'chol Davar. It's an honor and privilege to be part of your this webinar.
Well, thank you. Today, what I really want to focus on is not so much Mizrahi, even though I want to see the Mizrahi perspective on things, but on the elections that are coming up in just a few days in Israel. It's a very, very significant elections that are taking place, and we're seeing a changing dynamic, especially when it comes to the religious Zionist perspective. For those of us who grew up in the days of the Mafdal, we remember there was always one religious Zionist party, and every religion and every flavor had their own parties, and things have changed significantly. Today, where do you think most of the religious Zionist Jews in Israel are headed? What parties do they affiliate and associate with?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's an excellent question and not an easy one to answer, because the truth is there are religious, so first if we start in terms of religious Zionist politicians and religious Zionist MKs and members of parliament and ministers, you have from Yesh Atid on the left, maybe even for Avodah, but certainly Yesh Atid, there are a number of, Dati, Elazar Stern is very well known, and Moshe Kinli Torpaz. You've got in Kachol Lavan, of course, today. You've got a number of religious people. There's Matan Kahanan, who's now joined. You've got a number of others as well. You've got Chili Tropper. You've got Zev Elkin, Bnei Akiva graduates, and from the religious Zionist world. You've got the Beit Yehudi / Ayelet Shaked, also, of course, religious people. And then, of course, you've got the religious Zionist Party, which is, of course, made up of two technically joined parties. There's Otzma Yehudit of Ben Gvir and Bezalel Smotrich's religious Zionist Party, which are together running in the joint religious Zionist state. It is a technical union, and they will, as they in all likelihood, split straight after the election, and they're running separate campaigns as well. It's interesting that Itamar Ben Gvir has not defined his party as a religious Zionist party. He's trying to be broader and get people from all around. And then, of course, some might argue, Rav Lenny, is maybe the biggest contingent of religious Zionism is the Likud. I mean, how many people in the Likud are religious Zionists as well? And there's a strong contingent there as well. So it's really difficult to say. They say that the broader religious Zionist world might be between 15 and 20, let's say 20 seats in the Knesset, and perhaps half of those, or just under half, are the religious Zionist Party, and the other half are spread out through all, different parties. So there's no doubt, as you correctly have said, one of the great transitions in the last number of decades is from one more, let's call it monolithic Mafdal, which for so many decades was the, let's say the general sweep of the community, even though you did have, of course, in the time with Rav Lichtenstein and Zatzal and of Rav Amital, you had Meimad and other in the Tivot Shalom, and there was always sort of certain groups which, and then there was the Ichud Lomi, to the right, which also developed to the left and the right of the Mafdal. But there's no doubt that in recent years it's really splintered. And also a number of years ago, even there were three different parties which ran together. The Beit Yehudi, Yamin Chadash, and Ichud Lomi ran under Yamina Zal, which no longer exists, the Yamina party. So there's no question, it's all across the board. I'd say the one party I would say, which has called itself the Religious Zionist Party, it is the one party which I think is trying in a declarative way and very overt way to build religious Zionism. Meaning the other parties, Likud or Yesh Atid or Kachol Lavan, are generally trying to build whatever they're trying to build, and religious Zionism is part of it. This party is trying to build religious Zionism, so that is what makes it what makes it unique. And I will say one final thing: there are a lot of people. Professor Asher Cohen in Israel, he said that one of the largest parties in the religious Zionist world today is called Meitzad. What's Meitzad? Mitlabtei Atzunut Datit. People are not sure what they're going to vote, and they are. I was in a meeting today, and one of the people said to me, a senior person, he said he has no idea what to vote for. There isn't the classic Mafdal, although there is the Jewish Home Party with Ayelet Shaked, but there's a big question mark whether it's going to pass the threshold, and it seems highly unlikely. So there are a lot of people today which are really not quite sure what to do.
So I'm going to take a step back and just make sure people remember that Israel is a coalition government. It is not anywhere near a two-party system. You vote for a party, and the party, based on the people who are on the list of the party, the person who's number one. If you get enough seats, if you get enough votes to get a seat in Knesset, that number one person gets the seat. More votes, you can get 2 seats, etc., all the way down. And what really makes it complicated is the whole, as you were saying, Rev Doron, the entire nature of Israeli politics has shifted from being either a, once upon a time Avodah, the labor movement, which is really not a major entity anymore, Likud, which is still a major entity under Netanyahu and controversial because of Netanyahu's stances, but that all of the parties, or almost all of the parties, have religious Zionist Jews who are members of those parties. So whereas in the time of Yosef Burg, it would have been unheard of for Yosef Burg to be in a Yesh Atid, let's say, with a Yair Lapid. Today, it's not unheard of. And so we have that big problem. But I guess one of the other big problems, and it really confounds us in Chutz La'aretz a little bit, because in the diaspora, we still sometimes imagine Israeli politics a little purer than some of the American politics, is when you take someone, for example, like Itamar Ben-Gvir. He's a very controversial figure, and he seems to be, by his statements and his actions, to be much closer, if not even to the right of Kahana, who in his day, at the end of his time, he was actually banned from being part of the Knesset. How does an Itamar Ben-Gvir rise so high that it looks like he will be getting a lot of seats despite the kinds of statements that he's making?
Yeah, it's a great question, and I think it's something which is really, it's like confounding a lot of us, trying to think, how is it that a person who is so much at the periphery of Israeli society, the extreme, is part of a party which can get, now it's hard to know how much is his Otzma Yehudit and religious Zionism, because again, it's a technical, as people who might follow the news, Smotrich did not want to run together with Ben-Gvir, but was pushed into it by Bibi, at his home, and didn't allow them to leave before Shabbat until he made them all promises, because Bibi doesn't want to waste any potential votes in the right. But it's still incredible. So even if we don't know exactly how many Ben-Gvir and his party are worth, the fact that it seems to be polling at least around half of those 12 or 13, it really does boggle the mind. I must tell you, Rav Lenny, firstly, it really boggles the mind. I bumped 2 people this week, one that and that I would not publicize, who basically I got the sense that this woman's going to vote for Ben-Gvir. I almost fell off my chair. It's one of the last people I would have thought that this would have been the thing. She said, look, yes, he had extreme views, but at least he's moderated himself the last couple of years, and he's somebody who's got clear views on who this country belongs to, and and what we need to do. I must say, I almost fell off my chair when I heard that. And I spoke to my son, and my oldest son's an officer in the Israeli army, and he was chatting to some of his officers and friends, and one of them, out the blue, not a religious person, somebody as he sees as a mainstream secular guy, says, yeah, he thinks he's going to vote Ben-Gvir because the person is clear, and that's what we need today. There's too much political correctness. And he said he is amazed as well. So I must say, it is, on the one hand, perhaps it's a sign of the times that we live in all around the world, that if we look all around the world and we're seeing that there's either a strong push to the right with people pushing hard nationalist lines, or there's a strong push to the progressive left. This mainstream of what we once called the mainstream, the silent majority, the people who are sort of the more, let's call it normative, mainstream, nuanced. Unfortunately, it seems, in my mind, unfortunately, it seems that a lot of the passion today is being pushed to the extremes, both on the left and the right. And sometimes I think the one is a response to the other. I think we saw in the United States the whole rise of Trumpism and all of that was also, you push hard the one way, then you get a hard push the other way. So I think what's going on in Israel is reflective of what's going on around the world, that so much of the passion these days seems to be on people pushing to the more one-dimensional, extremes. And that just seems to be the norm, unfortunately, today, in my opinion.
And Mizrahi was always the bridge. I think I've shared with you the story that many years ago at a Zionist Congress, I was sitting there and Yosef Burg sat next to me for some reason. There was an empty seat. He sat down next to me and he was telling me stories. He had been in every Knesset from the beginning of the state and on to those days, which was in the 90s or the early 2000s. And he always told me how Mizrahi knew how to build the bridge and work with whatever coalition was in power at the time. Some of that changed, with movements to the right within the Mizrahi. Today, as the world leader of the Mizrahi, are you still trying to balance, or is the Mizrahi taking a position saying there is this coalition called Tzionut Hatatit and we have to be 100% behind it?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. Firstly, I think the traditional role of what the Mafdal party, Mizrahi in Israel, fulfilled is sorely missing in Israeli politics today. And I think it's also sorely missing in world Jewry and in the world as things move more towards the extreme. I remember a quote that I once heard from Rav Aaron Lichtenstein Zatzal, who once said, in life, you have to be passionately moderate, not moderately passionate. And the problem is that sometimes moderation leads to parafkat. People want sort of one-dimensional things, and the passion sometimes lies in the monolithic. I think our challenge today is, how does one be passionately moderate? Because moderation in and of itself seems to be a balancing act, and one which is hard to engender and to nurture passion. But I think that is our challenge. And I think Israeli society, I'll come back to Mizrahi in a minute. If we look at, this almost unheard of in the democratic world of a fifth election in under 4 years, 3 3/4 years. It's unbelievable. The challenge, and I think it highlights the weakness of democracy. The strength of democracy is the people decide. The weakness of democracy is when the people cannot decide and the system itself is forever creating this division. I think, unfortunately, what's happened, Rav Leni, in Israel is when you have a democratic election on average every 8 or 9 months, the focus of the country has become on what divides us, sharpening differences, undermining other people, which, once every 5 years, 4 to 5 years, it's hard enough. Now it's every so often. And the second thing I think we're finding is this deadlock. If you look at all the polls today, it doesn't seem like it's right now, as of the latest polls I've seen, the right-wing bloc is polling at around 60, around half, which is almost there. And the left-wing bloc is 56, without the 4 seats of the Meshutefet, the Arab Party, which Lapid today said that he wouldn't sit in a government with them, but he didn't say that he would not have a government where they could support from the outside, which means that if these elections go through as they are at the moment, you're going to have 60 on the right and 56 plus 4 on the left, once again a deadlock. And even if one of them, the right or the left, gets 61, then you're going to have what de Tocqueville called the tyranny of the majority. We've seen this tyranny of the majority where 61 can, so to speak, sometimes terrorize, or not terrorize, but sort of rule absolutely against the 49% either way. And I think this is a real challenge. And I do believe that what's missing in many ways is this ability to bring together. It's tough today in Israel because there've been so many different elections, but I really do believe The president called for it as well. I think there does need to be this traditional role that Mizrahi played in Israeli politics many, many years ago, and that we're trying to do at the movement we are absolutely committed to, is trying to be in a world and society and community being pushed more and more to the periphery to try and find that bridge and that middle road. And World Mizrahi works very closely with many different parties. We haven't affiliated with any party. I have to say that since the Beit Yehudi party in 2013 changed its constitution to reflect that it's no longer the Mafdal, but what they said in their constitution, what was previously the National Religious Party, it freed up Mizrahi to be a more broad, let's call it, less affiliated to this or that party. And I always say it's a weakness and a strength. The strength is it allows Mizrahi to be more, a world Mizrahi to be more of a unifier and bring the religious arms together, as opposed to always finding to sharpen the differences. On the other hand, the challenge is that when you don't have one specific party looking out for you in the Knesset, it creates a challenge. So I think what we're trying to do, Rabbi Leni, is walk this fine line of saying, we don't, as the Mizrahi movement, affiliate with any political party. We haven't in the last 9 years, but do want to work closely with all those parties and Chavrei Knesset who see their role as wanting to build religious Zionism in Israel and around the world. And it's a fine line that you need to walk, and a fine line can be walked, and that's the line we walk. No official affiliation, but working behind the scenes with the different members of parties and Chavrei Knesset who see it as, their passion to build religious Zionism in Israel and around the world.
So, Rabbi Doron, most of the people who will be watching this, not just those who are on live, but also those who watch the recording, and there are somewhere between 8 to 15,000 who watch each of the sessions, will be in the diaspora and will be in Chutz La'aretz. They may be members of Mizrahi, they may be members of other organizations. Do we have a role in the elections? Is it something that we should be supporting one party or another, or is our role to be supportive of Medinat Yisrael and allow the elections to move forward with those who vote?
My feeling always was this, having served the diaspora community for 15 years, also as a community rabbi and head of a school and the Mizrahi movement in South Africa, I found, and I'm sure you find a similar thing, that it really wasn't helpful in diaspora communities to start getting into the nuances of who you would vote for and support if you were there. A, you're not there, and B, the issues which were facing our community were not about the nuances of Israeli politics. They were the issues facing our community. And I always felt that diaspora community, first and foremost, should be supporting of Israel from the outside, and not necessarily get caught up in this divisive sort of mechanism of Israeli politics. I was talking to a friend of mine who's very involved in another movement, and was saying exactly, he's also very involved in diaspora, somebody we know, and he was saying to me that, the moment you get involved in Israeli politics, it straight away is it's something divisive. And of course, if you have to be involved, then you get involved. But I think if one doesn't have to be and one's not voting, I think our role as individuals and as a movement is to try and support from the outside, to be a force which is, I think, a supportive force, as opposed to one getting involved in the fray, which is not necessarily helpful or necessary.
And in fact, by the way, the American Mizrahi movement, the Religious Zionists of America, opted, when they were polled, not to take a position at all within this upcoming election for some of the same reasons, and also because we really don't understand all of the nuances of what's taking place. To us, we are relying always just on the papers, and for many people, the papers they can read in English as opposed to the papers, the press in Hebrew. And if the Tzionut Hadatit receives 14 seats as as the polls are suggesting, how do you see things? And they'll be together with the Likud. Are there things that you think will change for the religious Zionist world than what is happening now? Are the status of the Kotel going to change? Are things going to change in terms of funding of yeshivot? Or will it be more of some of the same, but you'll see more kippot in the Knesset?
Look, I think if the Religious Zionist Party, and again, remember, it might split straight afterwards, there's a very realistic chance that even if the Religious Zionist Party gets 12, 13, 14 seats, it may very well split the day after or the weeks after, and you'll have Otzma Yehudit, which I think will get, I think of the first 13, it's 5 or 6, I can't remember exactly. Certainly the first 10, Otzma Yehudit get 5, that's being various party. So if they get 10 seats, it'll be 5 each. If it's 11, this Noam, this other party, will get 1 seat. And I think 12 and 13 belong to the Religious Zionist Party. So I think what will happen, Rav Lenny, is if they do get 13 or 14 seats, it'll be something like 7 Religious Zionists, 1 Noam Party, 5 or 6 Otzma, and they'll split. So I think there won't actually be the day after. There's a strong chance there won't actually be one party, because it's really 3 parties in one, and that already sort of divides things. But I do think a strong showing of the parties together, I think, will strengthen religious Zionist institutions. And I think if there ends up being a right-wing government, which is made up of the Likud leading it, along with Shas, the Degel Torah, and and the Religious Zionist / Otzma Yehudit, that's a very sort of, that's a very right-wing government, and I think there will be ramifications. I think the right wing are pretty frustrated over the last year. I think they got very used to being in, especially the Likud Benjamin Netanyahu is the longest-serving prime minister of Israel. So in the last year, I think there was a feeling that there wasn't a majority of center-left people in the government. It ended up being people shifting at the last minute, the Yamina party, and the people on the center right and religious, many of them were outside of the government. So I think you're going to have, so to speak, a return with a vengeance, so to speak, and I think things will push hard the other way. I do think if things go the other way and the left wing, getting power again, it'll have to then rely on Arab parties. I think it's also going to be incredibly divisive and push in a certain way. And I wonder if things are close to a deadlock again. I just wonder if there might be, some type of, which Bougie Herzog has been pushing for. The president is some type of, let's call it the bigger center parties like Likud, Yesh Atid, and Kachol Lavan, which together more the Mamla, what that's called now, Kachol Lavan, the National Unity Party, together might be 68 or 70 seats. You might have that. So I think a strong turnout of the Religious Zionist Party, I think, will, especially if they do make their way into Knesset one way or the other, there will be a focus on strengthening issues sort of important to, let's say, many of the religious Zionist establishment and institutions. So,
tachlis, in a practical sense, if religious Zionist parties receive more than 10% of the vote, because 120 seats, you get 13, 14 seats, it's more than 10%, would we expect, beyond the political issues, the defense issues and those things, would we expect that yeshivot would have greater support, that the year in Israel would have greater support? Would we expect that other things that we would feel as religious Zionists grow, or is it more in a broader political sense?
Now, firstly, if I look at it in terms of the needs of the world religious Zionist movement, we're working very, very hard and closely with members of parliament, both in the Religious Zionist Party and religious Zionist members of parliament in other parties, to ensure that there will be support of the gap year in Israel. We in fact got a whole proposal together that we presented to a number of individuals. It has found a very sympathetic ear in the Religious Zionist Party, because there are people, one of the people running in the Religious Zionist Party previously worked at World Mizrahi and at Bnei Akiva, and chose, individually to run for the Knesset in position number 12. And he's an individual who's very, very sympathetic to our needs and understanding of our needs. And I have to be honest, it's been one of the things we've really struggled with, finding members of parliament who are fluent in English and Hebrew, understand Chutz La'aretz, have spent significant time there, and therefore are, like anything in life, Rabbi, if you're not passionate about something, you're not likely to prioritize it. He is super, super passionate about it. And I think having, for the last 10 years, being a Shaliach of Bnei Akiva overseas, being in Mizrahi, being Bnei Akiva, I think he particularly, he's worked very hard to change the platform of the Religious Zionist Party and create working documents. And I think he particularly will really push the issues. And there are a number of members of parliament of other parties who are religious Zionists who feel strongly about it. So I think we're working very hard that whatever eventuality there is, to push very hard with these people to ensure that that our yeshivot and seminaries and all that important to us will be supported. And I'm personally very, very encouraged that whatever the outcome will be, we're finding more and more sympathetic ears, both within the Religious Zionist Party and beyond, as to people who say, you know what, we are going to really push this agenda. I had a meeting today with yesterday with a particular a politician, which I don't want to reveal who, because we decided in the week before the Knesset, in the elections, there's no statements and we're not looking for titles. We're looking to find working relationships. And I was super, super encouraged that this will be, there'll be great results for us, please God.
So is that one of the examples of Mizrahi bridging, in the sense that you take a task, the year in Israel, and we want to strengthen the yeshivot, we want to provide greater scholarships, and you're working across what we would call the aisle on both sides or on every side in Israel?
Absolutely, because whether you center left, center or right, there are people who are very sympathetic to the needs of the religious Zionist / modern Orthodox community in broad terms, which are more and more understanding the power of the gap year in Israel and want to support it. So very much so. I'm seeing a huge a great interest in it. I will say, Rabbi, I've also felt the last 5 to 10 years in Israel, certainly the last 5 years, there's a shift within Israeli society in general and in the religious Zionist world of awareness of the diaspora, less this mindset of shlilat hagolah and negation of the diaspora, more trying to serve the Jewish people, achdut am Yisrael. There's something shifting in Israeli politics and in Israeli society, and even the fact that there's a Ministry of Diaspora Affairs over and above the national institutions. But I do find in civic society, not only politics, a shift in consciousness. And as we meet with members of civic society and politicians, I'm feeling it and we're feeling it more and more. And there's no doubt that one has to find people on both sides of the aisle, wherever people are sitting, to say, here is something that should be beyond politics, because it's a gap year in Israel where the people are more left-leaning, type yeshivot and sems, or more right-leaning. If they're broadly part of what we call the religious Zionist modern Orthodox world, they should be supported in every possible way. And the only way it will happen is not through support of individual institutions, but through all of them as a whole. And I'm very bullish about that.
Mm-hmm. And November 1st is the election.
Indeed.
Nowadays, how quickly do they call the results?
Well, they normally, I think it's, if I remember correctly, by 10 o'clock at night, they give what they call the midgam, where, all the news stations are interviewing people as they go out and vote. And therefore, by 10 o'clock, you get the first impression. But but then often by the next day, they had a time when one party was celebrating, by the next morning, there was a different result. And sometimes people say, because people don't tell the truth, they just want to trick the journalists. So we should know by the next morning. By the next morning, even though not all the diplomatic votes will be in and not all of the soldiers' votes will be in, by the night you get an inkling. But if it's within a couple of seats, it's too close to call, which I imagine is what it will be. And by the next day, I think mid-morning, by the next day, you sort of get a more accurate sense of by 2nd of November, I'd say by noontime or earlier, they'll, certainly by when you wake up in the United States, there'll be a sort of a more accurate sense of what the result.
And then the president invites that leading party to form a coalition.
Yeah. So what's interesting, this is an interesting thing. The president, according to the bylaws, there's no constitution, doesn't pick necessarily the leader of the biggest party. The president picks the leader of the party that he thinks has got the best chance of forming a government. There were times when heads of a smaller party, for instance, Yesh Atid, Lapid was able to form the government last time round, even though Likud had more seats. And sometimes, even in the first round, if the president feels that based on, his reading of Israeli, the turnout with the parties and how much seats they get, he could even give it to somebody who's in the second biggest party, if he thinks that that's where the person's got the best chance. It's unlikely. I think 1 year it happened, I think, with Kadima many years ago, and Likud, I think one got 28, one got 27, and the one who's got 27 was given the, that's when it's too hard to call. It's highly unlikely that if one party gets 32, like the Likud is polling with 34, and Yesh Atid gets 25, 20. I think it'll be too controversial to pick, the smaller party, but it is possible that if the president feels, the president will give the mandate for the first opportunity to the one who he feels has got the best chance. And if that person doesn't manage to do it, then he will give it to somebody else. And after a second time, if they don't manage to do it, it normally goes back to elections, which I think, unfortunately, is not entirely out of the question.
So Tuesday is going to be part of the excitement. Wednesday, we might know some results from the excitement. And then afterwards, we'll see what the real excitement is going to be.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it will also all be done in a way that will strengthen Klal Yisrael. And Reb Doron, our time is up. I thank you for all of your insights and your understanding of the political structure, and also for the fact that you're able to be beyond those politics and to be able to work with everyone. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you.
And we look
and
forward
you too,
to
Rabbi.
continued working together. Bye-bye.
Oh, man, thank you very much. Pleasure. Bye-bye. Thank you.